Hey everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. Alright, we're looking at Randy's Super XL. Now, we've had a string of what I like to call the easy fixes, you know, the normal maintenance crap. Carb kits, fuel hoses, duckbill valves, that kind of crap. The stuff that doesn't cost a guy a whole lot of money. This saw, I don't know. I don't know. So we've been talking for a couple months. And I guess the symptoms of this bad boy are, it'll start to run, it'll get hot, and he says smoke's coming out from the engine, not the exhaust. So I'm going to take that to mean from out around the cylinder and, you know, yeah. And then at that point he says it'll die from overheating, and if you let it cool down it'll start and run for a while and then overheat again. There can be an easy outcome to this. There can be that, oh crap, this needs a rebuild. So we talked about that. I don't know. Not yet. Just got it out of the box. That's good compression. Okay, so score 1 for the positive team. Let's take a look at this muffler underneath here and see what our piston and cylinder look like. Because this will go a long way. Okay. There is a piece of carbon loose down here. Alright, I want to blow this out. There's some deposit buildup on here. I don't want to roll it over all the way and let that drop into the cylinder, but I'm going to try and bring this back slow so that you guys can see the rings. That's as good as I'm going to get. So there's some minor scoring right down in here, very minor. That's carbon scoring and heated carbon. Now it has scored the piston rings, so means it is going to come apart. But this isn't a total loss. This isn't that worst case scenario. Now why it was getting that hot, I have a suspicion, especially based on this. I'm going to go ahead and I want to get the starter cover off, but I also want to take a look-see underneath the filter cover here. Now that's a good filter. It was sealed in place well. And there's not that much crap that's made it in the carb chamber. There's more than I care to see, but that's not that bad. And that appears to be sawdust, not dirt. And that sawdust is lighter than dirt. It's easier to suck in. Not the fine stuff, but still. I don't see anything here that really just makes me shiver, so I'm guessing we're going to get the starter cover off and find a whole bunch of crap up underneath here. That's my guess. Oh shit, yes. Okay, folks. I've been waiting for one of these for a while to really demonstrate how this can go sideways. First, that's the starter housing. You see all that buildup? I mean, there's places like right here, that's a cavity, but your average edge and belly, that's built up to anywhere from 1/8 of an inch all the way up to 1/4 of an inch of sawdust. What is this doing? Stopping airflow. That's not the worst of it. That's the worst of it right there. That's why she was overheating. And that's why there's that score mark on the piston. That thing can't get air. It can't get air through anything. So I ought to go hose that thing down right now, but I'm not going to. I've realized looking through my videos that I don't have a full teardown on a Super XL yet, but you guys are about to see it, or at least down to the engine. Because this whole thing, like I say, I'll assess that piston when I get it apart, and I'll talk to Randy. It might be reusable with a new set of rings. My guess is what we're going to want to do is drop a piston and rings in this. The cylinders should be fine. I'll be surprised if I see any damage on it. And again, the compression is still right up there. Even though there's some damage on that ring, it's not collapsed. It didn't collapse the ring landing on the piston itself. So that's a great sign. I'm hoping, again, that I can just get away with dropping a piston in this. But that is a classic example of what can go wrong if... I'm going to say once a year. If you're the kind of guy who cuts, 3, 4, 5 cord a year, pop your starter cover off and clean all this out. Whether you use air or hot water, it really doesn't matter. I personally think hot water does a better job, but you know what? Anything is better than nothing. So, likely, before this got to this state, the saw probably was boiling the fuel. In fact, I guarantee it was. So, if this saw had been running, you shut it down, and it wasn't out of fuel, of course, you probably would have heard a bubbling from the tank, and certainly if you pulled the cap off, you'd have heard bubbling, seen bubbling. They will boil the fuel. I had one do it one time, and I had no idea that they could build up this much sawdust around there. And it's especially true if you're cutting a sappy wood or wet wood or something like that, where it can suck it in, spread it around, and then it has a way to stick. And that's what's happened. And sometimes it's when you overfill the fuel tank, or if you got a leaky duckbill valve and you're cutting on the side and the fuel is running out that way. There's so many ways that it can happen, but long and the short of it is it does happen. And this has that classic can't spin the carburetor screws by hand problem. The seal on that reed block gets just a little stiff and it starts jamming up these threads. And that's an easy fix, but you got to get the sucker out before you can fix it. You don't want to start trying to break that block loose unless you're certain that your screw is undone all the way. Come on, there we go. Alright, that's a fairly new Tygon line. We may be able to reuse that. Now this, okay, I don't want the block to do that. I want it to come off with. So I'm going to pop that loose. And then you just roll that whole bloody thing out of there. Okay. I don't know if I should take that side note right now, but I'm going to, because this is annoying me. So I have to unscrew this all the way. Not okay. These should move freely through the block. This reed block. So, you just take one of your screws and you work it through a couple times. And that tried to push it apart, and that's not what I want. I'm trying to break whatever gobbledygook out of there so the screw will move freely. Much better. Now we can take this moment to inspect the reeds and see that they're basically laying flat. And there's a little bit of buildup back in there. So this thing was run at some point with a damaged filter, or perhaps no filter. I don't remember if Randy gave me the full history on the saw or not. But yeah, it definitely has been run with a damaged filter at that bare minimum at some point. So this one The base is still pliable. I mean, should have been working okay. And I'm not sure if that was the culprit or not. But anyway, back to the teardown. So now we've gotten our carburetor out of the way. The next thing to do is get your carburetor chamber and throttle handle off. Now, this is where having some of that sawdust out of the way would be nice. You got a couple oil lines you got to take loose for the manual oiler in conjunction with all this. I'm trying to avoid making a huge mess on the bench. We'll see how that goes. So these screws in the carb chamber, let's see if I can get an angle that works for all of us. Yeah, I can sort of live with that. These lower ones like to come loose because of the angle by hand, typically. You can get a short socket and ratchet in here, sorta, but it's not the greatest. Maybe with an extension I can get the right angle on that and not booger it up. Yeah, it wasn't great, but beats sitting there spinning it by hand. Now, I'm going to be interested to figure out what the hell this is all about. That's fuel. That is fuel on those bolts that were coming out of here. And how that got there, with where they're at, I'll be honest, I don't know. I'm starting to wonder if this fuel tank may not have a leak. It might. Got your screw down at the bottom. And now, take that oil line loose first. That should be a 3/8. And just kind of pop it back out of the way like that. Now this one is a little tougher. You don't want to distort the thing, so you just pull it out enough that, again, you can get your 3/8 open and wrench on it. And at a certain point, you got to be able to spin it over with your finger if you can keep it from binding. There we go. And now it should pull right off. I mean, no air could go through there. I'm going to set this outside. Some serious cleanup on this bad boy. You can see how restricted the fins were here. They're open on the muffler side, but that won't do any good because the air passage going this way is blocked. And the same thing down there. I mean, this thing, if it had half the volume of air that it was supposed to flowing through there, I would actually be quite surprised. So, that kind of sucks. Let's take this handle off now. It's about time to get it out of the way. Super XLs, you've got these two socket head screws, and if you got crap in here, which in the bottom one you almost always do, take the time to scrape that out. Otherwise you're going to round it off. There, that's the proper depth. Should just pull right out. This This one's been tweaked just a minor amount. Not much, but it was fitting a little tight there. Alright, so the next piece is getting the flywheel off, and this is where we're really going to start seeing some funky stuff. So get your screen off. That's also 3/8 on these nuts. And with any luck, the nuts will come off without unspinning the pawl studs. That doesn't happen very often, but once in a while it does. And then you just got to make sure you don't lose any of the hardware behind there when you're not looking at it. You don't have a good line of sight right now. I mean, even that screen, see how the holes are building up with crap? That's all going to get cleaned. We're going to get this thing back to flowing air the way it should. Alright. Let's see how much our flywheel wants to fight us here. Hey, knock that off. Breaking one of these down to components is not that, doesn't take that long. If you have to go down all the way to pulling the crank out of the drive case, you're going to spend as much time on that work on the assembly or disassembly as you will pretty much the rest of the saw, in terms of, you know, actual time building or unbuilding it. That doesn't count, obviously, carburetor work and that stuff, but in this saw, I'm kind of anticipating, since it's been a runner, I'm anticipating not needing to mess with the carb and focusing on the engine itself, which, you know, it doesn't hurt my feelings at all. I do enough carbs. It doesn't hurt to have something that isn't carb related once in a while. Although I hate to see a guy's engine like this. I mean, carb kits are cheap. Pistons aren't terrible in price, but still, they're more than a $10 carb kit, I can tell you that. Alright. Start doing this dance. Oh my God. Well, even though I knew that's what I was going to find, it's still... Whew. Yeah, that's a mess, folks. It's a hell of a mess. Get this flywheel back off of the tool. Again, I use this tool because I have it. It's not something you can go buy somewhere unless you find one on eBay, which is pretty uncommon. Most of them you've got to pull the pawls, these studs out, and then use the plate with bolts going down through it. That's a Homelite tool, and again, I got it in a box, one of my boxes of parts that I bought. So if you email and ask where to buy it, I'm going to tell you nowhere, unless you want to watch eBay for 5 years, because in that time you'll probably find one, maybe. Alright. Damn, that's a mess. Alright, I gotta come over here to the trash can and uncover the actual screws that we need to take off. So the good news is this isn't crusted, so cleanup isn't going to be, you know, it's not going to be a huge ordeal where you have to sit there and chisel a bunch of crap. Alright. So we're going to start by taking the coil and stator plate here off and getting it out of the way. I think you can slip the tank by it, but it's got to come off if we're going to pull that cylinder, and I can tell you for certain we're going to pull that cylinder. Okay. So this should just pull right off. And it's got a date with the bath too. Jeez. This poor damn saw. Alright, these screws that hold, those three that hold the fuel tank in, ought to be a 3/8 head. Okay, here's where we really, yep. That's a mess. All right, there we are. So that's the part I don't think I ever put a video up on. That's what it takes to get down to a piston and cylinder on these damn things. I know there is a video of this point and taking off the cylinder and the connecting rod and all that kind of jazz, and I think I even took the crankcase off. So I think I'm going to stop. I'm going to clean this thing because I'm sure as hell not cracking that cylinder with all this trash around it. And yeah, we'll come back, pull that cylinder, and we'll see exactly what it is we're dealing with. Okay, here we go. I think I got as much of a freaking bath as the chainsaw did. There's one downside to that method. It's messy. Especially that starter housing. It likes to channel dirty water right back up into your face. Oh well. A couple hours I'll be bitching because it's too hot, so hey. This side you pretty much have to do with a box end wrench, or excuse me, open end. Not much way to get to it. This is the newer style nut that's only 3/8 head. Still quarter 24, but like I say, they reduced the head size so that it's easier to get a wrench in here. The originals were a 7/16 head, and those were really kind of fun. Now, I'm not happy with how that cleaned up, but that's okay. We'll get to it. Alright, I'm going to bend these oil lines down just a smidge. The cylinder's already loose. God, looking at all these internal parts, I don't feel like this thing has that many hours on it. Okay. To be clear, I'm not taking this all and or pick and scraping hard. I'm just feeling there's a slight divot there. It's very slight. This cylinder is salvageable. What I'm going to end up doing is honing it really stinking lightly, really light. That chrome lining is thin, but I just want to take the crap off. I mean, we're talking, I won't be going more than about 100 RPM on my drill, and it'll be very, very light. There's where the damage is. And again, it did leave marks on the rings, and that's why we're at the point we are. And there's enough tear up on the side of that piston skirt. That's getting replaced. But Randy, that's the good news. It needs a piston. Cylinder's good, so I'm just going to ballpark $50 on that. I'm not sure, honestly. There's the aftermarket, so here, we'll have a quick discussion about this. There's aftermarket piston and cylinder kits out there. I haven't used one on this model of saw. And as long as I can find OEM parts of some type... Oh, come on, dummy. As long as I can find some OEM parts, I'm not going to use the aftermarket ones. Except, like I say, if absolutely necessary. I've bought most of mine from Little Red Barn. I'm sure you guys have seen them. If you've looked for aftermarket kits, you've seen those guys. And I would say I'm like 95% happy with the quality of those. Not quite now. 95% happy with them. There's a little bit of fitment issue here and there. Specifically like the one they sell for the 925. So it's a thick ring piston, which of course the original was a thin ring. Whatever, no big deal. But what is annoying is I've never been able to use the proper thrust washers, you know, on either side of the 925 wrist pin. They're not machined for that. Now, the earlier saws didn't use those, so is it a big deal? No. But it's just little details like that. I've had to, I don't even remember which one, but on like the piston skirt, you know, I don't know if I can get this on camera, probably. You can see there's a relief at the very bottom of the skirt there. I don't know if that's showing up. I've had to kind of sand grind, basically, the inside of the piston skirt to give clearance for connecting rods. Just little quality control things like that, that whatever Chinese factory is building them, they're not, I'll say they're getting 95% there. So anyway, if I can find OEM, I'm going to. And that's why, rather than saying, hey man, let's go out and get one of those kits with cylinder and all that, we're going to refurb this cylinder, it's not bad. I mean, if I didn't have a hone, I mean, you probably could slap this together without doing anything and it'd be fine. Most likely. I've got it, I'm going to use it and do it right. I'm virtually certain I've got a piston rat hold away somewhere, and if I don't, I will find one on eBay. Yeah, we'll just do it right. So, I'm going to wrap this up. That was disassembly. Reassembly is exactly the opposite. So I'm going to wrap it up with just a little piece of advice for any saw user. I know I've yapped about cleaning up your saws, blowing all this crap out, you know, at least once a year. This is a great example of where it can go. Don't have that out. Go really sideways. Now, Randy, you're lucky. This thing didn't overheat enough to seize the engine and destroy a bearing, or, you know, again, take out the cylinder. So that's good. I'd say anybody, you crack your fuel tank on one of these old saws and you see the fuel bubbling, you're done. You're done until you figure out why it's overheating. Whether it's broken flywheel fins, not very common unless somebody's done something silly. Usually it's this kind of sawdust buildup. And the way that was choked off, on a day hotter than 70 degrees, I guarantee it would overheat in probably 10 minutes. I'm guessing you'd get 10 minutes of runtime at best out of one of those. So if your saw shuts down because it overheated, I would recommend highly that you stop using it until you figure out why it did that. I mean, it's one thing you've been cutting for 3 straight hours, but even then, these things are designed. They've got a tolerance for, you know, heat, load, and all of that. It really should never come to a shutdown point. So anyway, there it is. I'll get this thing back together, and with any luck, the next time it's on video, we'll be doing a test run. Okay, there she is all assembled. I had a piston and ring set rat hold away like I'd hoped, so that's good. Let's give her a test run. I'm cautiously optimistic that this is going to go very, very well. A lot of assembly oil in there. Okay, I've got that set on a real fast idle. I'm gonna let it go for about 30 minutes, or until my neighbors kill me, one or the other. As long as it doesn't die out, good to go. Alright. Just shy of 30 minutes. Probably 25. Not bad. Never changed. That fast idle you heard when I had it, the camera first turned on is exactly where it ran the whole time. I gave it a few blips of the throttle in between, just to make sure it wasn't blowing too much smoke, running too rich, but I wanted it set a little rich for break-in. So that was broken in with steel HP Ultra at 50 to 1. It can be retuned to something else. It's pretty close right now. I checked the temperature a few times right at the top of the muffler port there. I figured that's going to be the hottest point. Should be. Heat rises, right? And it was always at 215 to 220. Never varied, and I could feel not just exhaust, but air from the flywheel pushing out here. So everything's cooling properly. Yeah. Just do a quick restart. You can't ask for more than that. Pretty good. So, give it my customary let it sit for a day or two, and then restart it just to make sure we don't have something unknown going on, but pretty sure, Randy, we are good to go.